The situations that occurred on planet Earth happened overnight without any warning. Large portals started opening in the sky, and gradually cities became filled with horrifying dragons and monsters of various sizes that terrorized the entire population. Later, science revealed that there was a world similar to Earth existing across the universe, and on that planet, a certain event had occurred, causing the entire planet to crumble. As a result, the remnants of this planet started flying towards Earth, and gradually, parts of the planet we all know, Earth, began to merge with the falling debris, and slowly both worlds started coming together. This was referred to as the phenomenon of adhesion. In this way, the unusual laws of nature and a wide variety of monsters quickly infiltrated Earth. As a result, 17% of Earth's surface was affected, and humans, inferior in the face of such monstrosities, lost control over their own planet. Independently, and as events unfolded, certain areas known as danger zones began to be constructed, where monsters reigned and controlled the area under their powerful claws. Over time, humans started calling these places dungeons. These zones were extremely dangerous for humans, who, unlike the different abilities and diverse powers of the monsters, were shattered in seconds despite their great efforts and the use of firearms. This event that occurred on Earth forever changed the way humans lived, as they had no time to prepare for such a horrifying reality. Everything seemed lost. Humans were eliminated in large groups, and with their weak bodies, they couldn't do anything against the powerful enemies. But then something magnificent happened. The monsters weren't the only ones who came from the other world. The natural limit with which humans are born as a species and the limitations of their potential caused by Earth's natural law were completely shattered as well. Thus, humans also began developing abilities and strengths comparable to those of the monsters and felt capable of facing these parasites that came to their planet to destroy them. However, although abilities awakened in all humans on Earth, they were different for each individual. Some had a great influx of power, while others barely surpassed their human limits. So, the Chosen Ones decided to start training to further expand the limits of their power in order to regain control over the dungeons. Gradually, this group of Chosen Ones formed as special agents working towards that single goal, and became known as adventurers. And that's how the era of dungeons and adventurers began, where balance began to emerge as a possible future, where humans would no longer yield to the power of the beasts. Over time, and after significant constant confrontations between these two sides, the world started forming an image of these adventurers and began praising each and every one of their achievements, drawing inspiration from their strength. Thus, not long after, organizations focused specifically on training adventurers were created worldwide. The best among these adventurer training facilities was in the Republic of Korea, which has managed to produce the finest adventurers over the past 25 years. This institution is globally known as the Superior School of Soldiers. In the present, two boys leaving the school discuss the country's history, but they are interrupted by the desperate sighs of the girls upon seeing D.F. Choi, a mixed-blood elf student with an adventurer father and an elf mother. In the hallways, it is said that this young man is a genius, and people claim that he will enter the upper ranks of adventurers within 5 years of graduating due to his incredible abilities, which is hard to believe given his young age of 19. Later, the two boys who are talking encounter their friend Jaryong, who seems to constantly avoid their invitations to go out partying. Although one of them acts jealous, Jaryong apologizes and leaves. Later, we find out that this strange attitude is not due to coldness towards his friends, but because he has a family member hospitalized and needs to pay the hospital bills, leaving him no choice but to work. As Jaryong heads to work, DF sees him in the distance and has a strange feeling but decides not to pay much attention to it. Then Jaryong arrives at the meeting place with his clients. However, things start escalating when one of the people hiring their services becomes enraged at having a university kid in front of him. The contractor begins to shout insults and threaten Jaryong and his boss, believing they are mocking him. Unfazed and with a serious and cold attitude, Jaryong disrespects one of the former adventurers present, reminding him that he is no longer an adventurer. Feeling insulted, the man decides to teach the young man a lesson and prepares his fists to teach him some manners. Although Jaryong's boss advises him to apologize to avoid getting hurt, our protagonist claims he doesn't know how to do such a thing and instead takes off his jacket to start the fight with the former adventurer who is twice his size and muscularity. The contractor, upon seeing his adventurer bodyguard about to confront a child, becomes concerned and asks Jaryong's boss if he doesn't want to back down from his words. But the boss remains calm, smoking a cigarette, and unfazed. The man insists that his bodyguard is incredibly strong, and the reason adventurers retired was because of aggression towards their own teammates. so he could even take the university student's life. But the boss remains in the same position and doesn't utter a word, confident in Jaryong's power. Upon hearing this, our protagonist remains unfazed as well, and, to make matters worse, continues to mock his opponent, calling him trash. Feeling insulted once again, and without any consideration for facing a child, Lee Pilju, the former adventurer, throws a powerful punch at our protagonist's face, thinking it could put an end to that rude behavior. However, Jaryong easily dodges the punch and quickly, without breaking a sweat, kicks his opponent in the face, which he cannot evade and is left severely injured. While the contractor is dumbfounded by the young man's power, Lee Pilju starts to think that he may have underestimated his opponent's strength, as the recent display of power shows that he has the reflexes and strength of a professional. But that didn't scare him. Instead, it only angered him enough to awaken his full power. When this strange extraterrestrial power affected humans on Earth, different abilities awakened in each human, and adventurers began training according to their abilities. One of these abilities is the tank, which allows one to increase volume, have giant-like strength, and skin as strong as iron, serving as a position to protect team members from dungeon dangers. The strength of their trained bodies allows them to even repel bullets from personal firearms and withstand the overwhelming firepower of missiles, as their job is to be a protective barrier. Well, this is the case for Lee Pilju, who has just awakened his full power to face the boy. Now, his physical strength is at the level of a truck, so a single blow from him could pulverize the boy's bones. In this new state, Lee Pilju starts throwing punches, but our protagonist skillfully manages to dodge them. However, he has lost some of his arrogance and is a bit surprised by his opponent's power. But he is no fool and realizes that, in addition to his strength, Lee Pilju is trying to trap him, which he immediately detects and avoids. Pressured by his boss, Jaryong decides to end the fight right there and grabs a pipe from the ground. Besides his great power, the boy is also knowledgeable about the strengths and weaknesses of different adventurers. He knows that although everyone believes tanks are unbeatable, they actually have a weakness, an entity that can concentrate powerful and destructive force in a single point, a more skilled damage dealer than them. Knowing this, Jaryong takes advantage of the powerful punch Lee Pilju is about to throw at him and simply strikes him with the pipe he had previously grabbed. To everyone's surprise, the boy leaves his opponent motionless on the ground, and Lee Pilju asks him where he learned such incredible skill, to which he replies that he saw his father use the same technique. After the battle, we will learn that most adventurers can be divided into 4 categories based on their abilities and experience. From lowest to highest rank, they are stone plate, copper plate, silver plate, and gold plate. The top 100 adventurers are called rankers and are assigned color ranks outside of the 4 ranks. We also get a better understanding of Jaryong's line of work, as he seems to belong to what is called dungeon smugglers. Every day, adventurers work hard to explore dungeons, and when they succeed in defeating monsters, they obtain countless treasures. However, before these treasures can be taken out of the dungeons, they need to be inspected. This is because many of them possess incredible power, and if these items were allowed to circulate without permission, they could be used for evil purposes, endangering lives. Thus, the Adventurer Association inspects or registers the treasures and taxes them according to their value. But there are people who violate this rule, attracting adventurers who don't want to pay taxes and secretly hoarding the treasures. This seems to be Jaryong's job. When Jaryong was a little boy, his father was the ultimate explorer, not just because he was his father, but because he was truly skilled at what he did. His name was Yoo Jaryong, and he was one of the heroes of the first generation of explorers, the ones who first faced the monsters. The story of the first generation is a great legend for all who hear it, but for the adventurers of that time, it was truly a hellish experience. There wasn't enough information about anything, and everything had to be discovered through horrifying experiences. They didn't know what kind of place dungeons were or what kind of monsters inhabited them. Monsters that are easy to defeat in the present were an unknown calamity for the explorers of that era. Furthermore, it was a time when there were no abilities to fight against monsters, nor the items that are so common in the present. In those desperate conditions, the first-generation explorers went through trial and error, risking their lives. The survivors were the ones who passed on their experiences and achievements to the next generations, becoming heroes. One of them was our protagonist's father, the dragon hunter Yoo Jaryong, who earned that name for being the first person capable of destroying a dragon. Due to his life as a legend and the great achievements he had accomplished over the years, Yoo was not only the most powerful fighter in the eyes of his son but in the eyes of the whole world. Jaryong believed he was invincible, However, one day, when Jaryong was still a young child, he witnessed his father losing his life due to poison. During his explorations, Yoo had encountered a deadly poison that he had tried to avoid. But after decades of excessive work, his body could no longer resist it. Yoo Jaryong tried everything to cure himself, but the doctors only took advantage of his vulnerability and took away his fortune and his work. For years, Jaryong watched as his father physically and mentally weakened. While he entered adolescence, his father was deteriorating further. And to make matters worse, after years of tranquility, the world began to forget the legend, the dragon hunter Yoo Jaryong. Thus, the man lost his identity as a hero, his work, and gradually, his life due to an incurable poison. All of this story came to Jaryong's mind after defeating Lee Pilju, as the technique used to defeat him was one he learned from his father. Later, calm and composed, he asserts that Lee Pilju should be fired for being weak, and after these words, his boss tells the contractor that due to the fight, the payment should now be doubled. Although the contractor initially refuses due to not having the money, with a few words from the boss and after witnessing the incredible power of our protagonist, he decides to continue living and accepts to pay double. Later, when they are alone, the boss asks Jaryong if he has heard of the Empyrean Wasp, which even scares our protagonist, who asks in horror if that's what they have to face. The Empyrean Wasp is a monster whose level of danger is considered the highest, not only in Korea, but in the whole world. What used to be Uido, where the wasp made its nest, became Korea's demonic kingdom with the highest difficulty. Even for a high-ranking adventurer, it is difficult to confront a monster of that level. And those monsters are flying all over the place. So for a smuggler like Jaryong, well, it's impossible. According to the contractor, there was a major raid the day before that wasn't publicized, where the government's army and 7 white-rank adventurers formed an attack squad. Although they failed in their main objective of eradicating those beasts, they did succeed in capturing the queen bee. But one of the 7 adventurers stole the royal jelly from the Empyrean Wasp and ordered a subordinate within the attack squad to smuggle it out. This jelly, if consumed by a human, could bring the person back from the dead. This seems to be our protagonist's new job. After the Great Invasion, dungeons were created all over the world. Among them, there are 2 considered the largest in Korea. The first one is Jeju Island, a dungeon fused with a volcanic mountain range. The other one is fused with the Igar Forest, which used to be located in Uido in the center of Seoul. With Uido at the center, Mapo, Yongsan, and Yongyangpo were taken over by this dungeon. Most of it remains unexplored, and many adventurers lose their lives trying to explore the region. Our protagonist is heading to that place. It seems that one of the subordinates from the group that went to defeat the Empyrean Wasp, the one carrying the royal jelly, managed to transport the cargo to a meeting point. But after arriving there, they lost contact. Despite the dangerous nature of the mission and the fact that the disappearance of this subordinate implies an even greater level of danger than they thought, Jaryong's boss sends him on a new mission to go to the location and retrieve what the lost man had, if he can find it. Without complaining or regretting such a risky mission, Jaryong gets to work, prepares his exploration gear, and heads to the Igar Forest in search of the royal jelly. However, before he sets off, his boss warns him that the royal jelly is a highly valuable treasure, so not only humans will be seeking it, but also many creatures from the forest. Therefore, he advises Jaryong to be extremely careful. Although Jaryong, with his usual arrogant attitude, doesn't want to pay much attention to the warning, he realizes that it comes at a good time. As soon as he sets foot in the forest, he encounters a gigantic footprint of some monster that passed by seconds ago. He realizes that many beings will be drawn to the scent of the jelly. On the other hand, a young girl named Jin Seram, who is in her first year at Warrior High School, is facing the biggest problem of her life. Scared, she finds herself behind a tree in the middle of the forest, thinking that this should have been an easy trip to the dungeon for her midterm exam. However, it was not the case. Instead, she encounters a gigantic monster that should never have been there, a monster the size of a building, whose foot is larger than the girl's entire body. The test, at first, was supposed to be easy. She had to collect as many coins as possible placed inside the dungeon, all within the given time frame. Although it was a test used to simulate real combat situations, the test area was the lowest possible level. It should have been easy since it was a beginner's area. Even the monsters there were weak and had low intelligence. But things didn't go as planned, and now she's facing a giant with a terrifying skinless face that constantly pursues her. Although her trained physique allows her to run long distances, her endurance has limits, and she can't run her whole life waiting for the monster to get tired. In that moment, she realizes that the only thing she has left is to hope for a miracle. Nevertheless, she decides to defend herself and, using her archery skills, she starts to confront a level 3 Titan. However, her attacks are harmless to the monster, as its skin durability is greater than that of a tank. Despite this, Jin continues to launch constant arrow attacks. She knows that the monster doesn't even need to dodge them because they don't cause any damage, but she hopes for a distraction, a slip up, to be able to hit it with one of her arrows in just the right spot. Jin belongs to a class of warriors who infuse magic into the tips of their arrows, a magical ranger. Knowing that her power is limitless, she decides to bet everything on one final attack. She generates a massive explosion, the greatest she can achieve, and destroys a large part of the forest, also hoping to have destroyed her opponent since a blow of that power should be able to defeat a level 3 monster. But when the smoke from the explosion dissipates, Jin realizes that the blow didn't reach its target. The monster, anticipating the young girl's attack and seemingly knowing her powers, jumped before being hit by the arrow and managed to dodge the attack. Surprised and deeply disappointed, Jin realizes that her only option now is to run until they both run out of strength, and she starts running, until she realizes that the monster is not pursuing her at the same speed. When she turns around to see what just happened, she sees Jaryong attacking the Titan from above and saving her life. This also surprises the girl, as she can witness the incredible power of this new arrival. While Jin watches mesmerized by the events unfolding before her eyes, Jaryong is surprised that despite the powerful blow he delivered to the Titan, it still stands unharmed. He contemplates his next move and without hesitation, decides to use his weapon, a metal rod-like object, to attack the monster head-on. Seeing this, Jin thinks the boy is crazy for willingly leading himself to certain death. No one could survive attacking such a beast head-on. However, to her surprise, Jaryong's plan was not to strike the monster, but to grab its attention and then use his last blinding torch to blind the Titan. This torch is a tool made from the scales of the blinking fish, a monster that lives in the deep sea dungeons and possesses an incredible incapacitating ability for its price. It was once beloved by all adventurers, but due to its incredible performance and misuse, many adventurers lost their abilities, leading to a ban on its use in production. Now, with the beast no longer pursuing them, Jaryong continues on his path, advising Jin that now that he saved her life, she should take care of herself from now on. Despite appearing cold-hearted, Jaryong has his reasons for behaving this way. He knows that among adventurers, one must demonstrate superiority and distance, never trusting anyone, as it could lead to betrayal. As if that reason wasn't enough, the heads of smugglers like Jaryong fetch a high price in the market, so he must be cautious not to be taken by surprise. However, as he begins to walk toward his objective, he notices Jin following him. Using his enormous skills, he climbs a tree almost imperceptibly, leaving the girl astonished as he disappears before her eyes. Wondering where he might be, Jin is suddenly attacked by Jaryong, who becomes nervous at being pursued by another adventurer. But he is surprised to learn the girl's reasons. She wanted to thank him for saving her life. That's not all. She confesses that she knows he is a smuggler and has no intentions of harming him. What Jin wants is to give him a commission and pay him for his services. However, Jaryong notices the emblem of Jin's school and claims he has no interest in getting involved with a Silver Spoon student from Warrior High School. With that, our protagonist turns his back on her, warning that if she follows him again, he will bury her alive. Then Jin starts saying that the reward for capturing people like him is 50 million won, and if she were to catch 5 people like him, she could buy a blood of Inkill necklace. She proposes that he help her with her midterm exams and she will pay him with the blood of Inkill as an advance, and the rest of the money later. This catches Jaryong's attention, as he considers the girl to be not only spoiled but incredibly rich. However, their conversation must come to a halt as the Titan emerges from its incapacitation and attacks once again. Jaryong tells Jin that this time he won't save her and hands her his metal rod. Jin looks at him perplexed, not knowing what to do with it, but Jaryong begins to guide her movements, berating her for being useless. He instructs her to repeat the attack she used before, but this time launch it at the end of the rod and then throw the rod back at him. As Jin prepares to execute the attack, she realizes she has no magical power left and panics. She only has a quarter of her magical power remaining, and with that level of power, she won't be able to harm any monster, let alone the Titan in front of her. She decides to return the rod to Jaryong and flee while he distracts the Titan. True to her decision, Jin throws the rod with only a quarter of her strength, and our protagonist faces the Titan head-on. As they fight, Jaryong recalls that when battling a monster, brute strength is not the most important factor. Instead, it's the sense of timing and precise targeting of attacks that matter. In other words, adventurers must rely on their senses and talents. As he says this, Jaryong demonstrates his extensive battle knowledge by swiftly decapitating the Titan with a single strike, aided by his metal rod. Meanwhile, Jin, who ultimately didn't flee, watches in awe as the events unfold. Little by little, we are learning Jin's story. Lucky Seram, a billionaire and owner of a South Korean company that ranks fourth in the market, the Jin Seram Group, can get almost anything he wants. One of the heirs of the group made a commitment with an elf from another world, and Jin Seram, was born from that union. Since always, she respected adventurers more than anyone else in the world, and since she was a child, she always wished to become one herself. However, from a young age, she was warned that it would be an impossible task. Despite her efforts and training, the elven blood in the girl was too weak, so it was better for her to settle for being a simple human, or so her trainer believed, who insisted that pressuring her was pointless. However, her father continued to insist because he wanted to support his daughter in her desire. Then, the trainer explained that perhaps, in the future, Jin could become someone decent. Stubborn and convinced of what she wanted, Jin would never give up, and that would bring her great benefits. Furthermore, Jin, since birth, had great advantages compared to her lack of talent, wealth, name, and lineage. Those things would only make people never take her seriously and laugh at her, albeit with a hint of envy. But she, despite the isolation, never stopped fighting because she always had a clear goal: to become an adventurer. And someday she would achieve it because talent is not something that falls from the sky, but something that is built, and with great effort, she could accomplish something. Or so were the words of her trainer. Back in the present, Jin can't believe what she just witnessed, the way a boy around her age possesses such great power to defeat a titan with a single blow. Meanwhile, Jaryong, paying little attention to the girl's astonishment, laments that in the battle with the monster, he accidentally broke his special glasses. Glasses provided by his boss, enhanced with 4 different types of magic, which allows easy recognition to be hindered and his voice to change, essential for concealing his identity and not easily being found out as a smuggler. However, his thoughts are interrupted when Jin approaches him, a bit embarrassed but friendly, to tell him that he is a senior at her school. But he, infuriated, only responds that he never went to school. She believes he means that he can't attend a school like hers because of the exorbitant fees, but Jaryong states that he never went to any school, which surprises the girl. She then asks who taught him to fight like that. After Jaryong forcefully takes the blood of an kill necklace from Jin's hands, he claims he learned everything on his own, never went to school, at least not a special one. This drives Jin crazy as she can't believe someone with his power and ability learned everything on his own. Then Jaryong hands her his high school ID card, a regular humanities high school. Jin remains stunned, unable to understand what is happening, but she is interrupted by Jaryong, who tells her that she must now give him something to prove her identity, a student ID card or anything else. After inspecting the girl's ID card, Jaryong puts it in his pocket, making Jin very nervous, thinking she has fallen into a trap. But then Jaryong explains that he now works for her, and he has revealed his identity as a smuggler, so he must hold on to something important to her to ensure she doesn't stab him in the back. Then, to finalize the contract, Jaryong takes a picture of Jin, claiming it is proof of their involvement. Smugglers and those who hire them face the same punishment once they are brought to justice, and that photo will demonstrate they are working together. Nervous, Jin can't refuse and ends up appearing in the photo. At that moment, she realizes that perhaps she has gotten involved with someone much more dangerous than she expected. After taking the photos and having all the necessary evidence to prove they are working together, Jaryong gets more technical and asks Jin exactly what her task is from now on. She claims that her job is to collect coins. Within the 6-hour limit, she must gather coins that have been placed in various locations throughout the test center. Jin must find coin boxes in specific places and prove that she is a student, so they must be together for the duration of the task. Currently, the girl already has 1 coin in her hands and needs to find a second one to pass the test, which is not far away, so she is about to finish that. Unfazed by the silly job he has been assigned, Jaryong asks where that second coin is, and she explains that they need to go to the ruins of the old Eugene shopping center. Our protagonist's attitude changes incredibly upon hearing that name, and he affirms that their encounter is no coincidence because he is also heading there. He then explains to Jin about the other mission he is carrying out, commenting that the scent of honey attracts monsters, so that must be one of the reasons why a titan was found in a beginner's area like that. Upon hearing this, Jin becomes scared because she no longer believes she can accompany him to search for that coin, as she almost lost her life in front of the gigantic titan, and it would be even worse if she had to face bees. When Jaryong notices this, he asks if there might be another coin in a less dangerous place, but Jin states that it is the last one remaining because the others have already been taken by the other students who were taking the exam. It's either that coin or giving up on becoming an adventurer. Then he proposes a new deal. Knowing the complex situation she is in, Jaryong will search for the coin and bring it safely in front of her. He offers her 950 million, all the money he has in his account at that moment. Upon hearing the exorbitant price for his services, Jaryong is astonished because it is more than he has ever been paid. But he doesn't show it to his employer, who says that if it's not enough, she can give him a little more later on. With the deal closed, both start running towards their goal, and Jin takes the opportunity to ask him if he really taught himself. When Jaryong begins to explain that it wasn't entirely like that and that it was a more complex situation, he cuts his sentence in half because they come across two gigantic monsters. Two Velociraptors, a native species with a level 2 difficulty. However, we learn that Jaryong doesn't have an adventurer's title because he gained his experience by risking his life. Although it's not as simple as that. When he was very young, he witnessed his father's movements, which allowed him to learn 3 techniques. The first one is the needle, using all his speed, power, and weight to stab the vital point of his opponent. It's a simple but not so simple move that he earned through experience, intuition, and talent. A technique that not even high-ranking adventurers could master. This is the move Jaryong uses to defeat one of the Velociraptors, while Jin takes care of the other. However, they realize that there are only 2 when. In general, those types of monsters move in groups of 5, which means there have been more losses in complicated situations due to the real honey. After defeating the monsters, Jaryong decides to take a short break before continuing the journey. Jin then hands him a capsule to quickly recover energy and magical strength, but instead of taking it, he keeps it to sell it on the black market because it would be a great profit. Jin gets angry seeing how the boy uses those things, and Jaryong thinks that rich kids are very strange. But without saying anything, they continue on their way without resting. After exploring the place a bit more, Jaryong reminds Jin that they are not there to hunt but to take what they need and leave, so they will try to avoid fights and confrontations as much as possible. To prevent mistakes, Jaryong asks the girl to follow his orders, no matter how many monsters there are. She calmly accepts, but internally she starts to have a strange but beautiful feeling. For the past few years, she was a stranger in her school, unrecognized by others, and this would be her first experience of jumping into danger with someone as a partner, and above all, someone she trusts for their high abilities. Finally, both enter the abandoned shopping center and are astonished to see the scene in front of them. In the darkness of abandonment, there are dismembered corpses of dozens of humans who passed through there. After the initial shock, Jaryong returns to his usual impassive state, but Jin fails to recover and remains still in front of such a scene. She asserts that the beings present there must not be normal monsters because they pose a threat even to higher-level adventurers. Jaryong, in a cold manner, tries to reassure her, saying that they knew they would encounter dangerous monsters there in the end. The problem is that Jin is surprised because it is messier and bloodier than what she expected. However, she must remain calm because things won't go well otherwise. As soon as they finish this short conversation, they focus on the monster that had dismembered so many humans before, a gigantic being without a head, but instead, its stomach has a huge mouth with sharp teeth. This species is called Cutting Lips and is of level 5 danger. While Jin stays at the entrance, Jaryong starts fighting the monster, which, despite appearing almost dead, still has a lot of energy. It extends a horrifying tongue from its mouth to confront our protagonist. While Jaryong tries to strike it with his staff, the monster manages to grab it with its tongue, almost leaving the boy without his main weapon. However, Jaryong ultimately defeats it and then joins Jin, who had her bow prepared but wasn't willing to act unless necessary. Then, Jin tells him that she was surprised by the monster's survival ability since it seemed dead. But Jaryong affirms that it's not about survival ability. They intentionally left it half alive as a warning signal in case someone approached. In this case, them. It's because this type of monster tends to scream and alert its allies when it feels its life is in danger. Upon hearing this, Jin asks who might have devised such a strategy, and then a young man appears from the darkness, claiming that it was all his plan. Seeing him, Jaryong becomes extremely furious, and Jin is surprised that such a young adventurer is a smuggler. But then Jaryong states that he is not an ordinary adventurer but a villain, who is there to eliminate them and take the loot. Since it has nothing to do with their task, Jaryong decides that he can't let things continue like this. Similarly, the villain remarks that it's a pity for them because they have no escape other than losing their lives in that place. Hearing these words, Jin is shocked once again as she didn't expect this turn of events. Meanwhile, the villain continues speaking. A few days ago, he learned that one of his comrades was smuggling something valuable, so he decided to follow him and eliminate him without anyone noticing. However, after following him for a long time, he couldn't find him. While this boy tells the story of how he ended up there and betrayed his own comrade, Jaryong starts feeling an enormous power emanating from him. It turns out that this boy is not of a low rank like the adventurer he defeated earlier. This boy is from a very, very different rank. Knowing this, Jaryong tells Jin to find the coin as soon as possible and leave because what will happen there will be very dangerous. Besides, there shouldn't be many monsters lurking around thanks to this high-level adventurer. Although Jin initially refuses to leave him alone, Jaryong confirms that nothing will change if she stays there because the fight is now between two high-level adventurers. Finally, with some insults fueled by the tension of the moment, our protagonist manages to convince the girl to escape. Seeing this, the other adventurer, in a haughty manner, tells Jaryong that it's a shame he left because if they were together, they would have a better chance of survival. But our protagonist is sure that wouldn't be the case. Having said that, they both start fighting, and a great power is reflected on the battlefield. They seem evenly matched. However, at a certain moment, Jaryong reads his opponent's sword, which surprises him because he had never read his attacks before. And thus, our protagonist manages to get close and deliver a powerful kick to his opponent's face, leaving him on the ground. But seconds later, Yoo Jaryong, the villain, rises from the ground and tells Jaryong that he underestimated him because of his youth and yet, he is more powerful than many professional adventurers, so much so that he had to bring out his equipment of gold-level adventurer. Then we see him appearing on the scene in a completely different form, an anthropomorphized monster with large fangs and black skin as dark as the night. Although the fight between adventurers may seem strange and even be called betrayal, the reality is that it is quite normal among higher-level adventurers. Jaryong's chief already explained it. Adventurers are accustomed to hunting and exploring. That's what they are trained for. However, as they rise in rank, they start fighting each other to obtain loot. Although it may seem brutal, that's the reality. The higher the level, the more they must train for possible human-to-human fights. And they go without any legal issues or anything like that because anything can happen in the dungeon. If they find the body of an adventurer, it can be attributed to the claws of a monster. In this context, the more they train, the more equipment they start building, and equipment is half the combat power of an adventurer. Knowing this, and seeing the level of Yong's equipment, we can conclude that it is of an extremely high level, and will be a great obstacle for our protagonist. Jaryong is also noticing this. He is aware that his opponent never avoided his attacks but simply endured them with the level of his equipment, and his sword, which has a superior defense level blade. It is nearly impossible to defeat him because, in addition to his superior sword, Yong also has a shadow jacket, on a plus rank armor that consumes the user's blood to maintain athletic capacity and form a superior defense against impact. A berserker-style combat armor. But everyone has their weaknesses, and there must be some opening that Jaryong can exploit to defeat him. However, his opponent's level is so high that making a risky move could easily lead him to death. Therefore, while they fight, Jaryong continues analyzing everything around him to figure out how to proceed and emerge victorious from that place. But in the process, he suffers a worrying number of blows, making Yong believe he is the winner. However, Jaryong calms himself down and makes it clear to Yong that he is a bit disappointed in him. He got scared when he felt such a strong aura coming from his body, but relying on armor against a simple high school boy is not that impressive. This infuriates Yong, and he starts to panic. It's not just this comment, though. As Jaryong knows, Yong is in a hurry and wants to quickly end the battle to find Jin and silence her forever. The more time passes, the more impatient the villain becomes. And that's what our protagonist relies on, trying to buy time to unsettle him. So, they continue fighting, and Jaryong must use the second move, also learned through observation and experience. But this move requires not only his own strength but also utilizing the enemy's strength against them to deliver a powerful blow that would be impossible on his own. The name of this ability, which Jaryong didn't fully perfect, is called Swell. After using this ability, our protagonist is left exhausted because he had to unleash an unimaginable amount of power. He is even surprised that he had to use that move in a real battle. Despite that, Yong is still standing, albeit with severe wounds. When Jaryong tells him to surrender because he can no longer win the battle, Yong claims that he will defeat him, even though his equipment is already halfway destroyed. And after uttering these words, he stabs himself in the chest, leaving our protagonist dumbfounded as he doesn't understand what is happening at that moment. Meanwhile, as the battle unfolds on the first floor of the building, Jin goes in search of her objective. After climbing up to the 5th floor, she finds the box that is supposed to contain the coin. Although she continues to be horrified by everything she is experiencing in those moments, the girl follows Jaryong's orders, as she promised. She places her hand on the box to verify its identity, and once confirmed, she obtains the coin. However, feelings of guilt begin to fill her head, and she can't believe that she left her partner alone, even though she knows perfectly well that staying there would only be a nuisance instead of help. On the other hand, we learn a little about young Dajiun's past. Since he was young, everything came easily to him. His time in school only proved to himself that he was better than everyone else. He had superior physicality compared to his classmates, so he could dominate them, and everyone feared and obeyed him. He achieved perfect grades that never dropped below 100, and adults regarded him as perfect. Everything was easy for him, except for one thing he could never accomplish: entering Warrior High School, the same high school Jin currently attends. Despite his repeated attempts to enroll, his application tests were rejected time and time again. Warrior High revolved around connections and money, prioritizing money over talent. That's why he decided to attend a school that purely focused on talent and ability, Gangyon Institute. That way, he wouldn't be left behind. In his surpassing test, Young achieved first place in the cumulative score count, much higher than the average rookie's scores. Thus, he built himself up as a selected genius among the minority. The hallways were buzzing with rumors that he and the second-place student would easily become top rankers in no time. Finally, graduation arrived, and he graduated at the top, the best in his class. But during the diploma ceremony, all he could think was that the person handing him the diploma was a coward for quitting early and becoming a teacher. He felt nothing but anger and resentment toward him. However, despite his arrogant attitude and the belief that he was always superior to others, one day life took a turn and forced him to face reality. During one of his adventures, his entire group was destroyed by a monster, leaving him alone and injured. He had to seek help from someone stronger. At that moment, he felt the arrogant gaze of pity and anger from that superior person. And then he realized that he was never chosen. He was just a skilled adventurer whom ordinary people admired, but nothing more than that. But he wouldn't let things continue that way. That's why he began building a great team while continuing to train and strengthen himself. That's why the jacket he currently wears to fight Jaryong is made entirely of a living vampire. That vampire told him that he could take all the blood flowing in his heart and transfer it to Young by killing Jaryong at that moment. That explains why he stabbed himself. Since then, his appearance has become even more terrifying than before, which is saying a lot. Immediately after uttering those words, Ewing starts attacking our protagonist, and Jaryong notices that his speed has significantly increased. The fight becomes much more challenging than a few moments ago. Despite that, Jaryong manages to dodge several of his opponent's attacks, but he is injured and extremely exhausted. Seeing this, Ewing can only laugh and admit that his opponent has great power, good reflexes, and impressive speed, as he can currently evade his attacks. This excites Ewing because he has a formidable opponent and starts attacking more frequently. Although Jaryong can still dodge, it becomes increasingly difficult for him. However, he is confident that Ewing cannot maintain that level forever, as if he uses his blood as fuel, he will definitely reach a limit. Then he begins to think that if he sets a trap to make him consume a lot of blood and then uses his needle attack, he can defeat him. But to his bad luck, Ewing is already in front of him, obstructing his plans. When it seems that everything is about to come to an end because the villain is in front of Jaryong, who has little room to make a move, something unexpected happens. From behind our protagonist, Jin appears and fires a powerful arrow of fire and magic that manages to stop Ewing's attack and save Jaryong's life. Although the boy is surprised and slightly impressed, he only mocks her and asks why she doesn't listen to him, then lets out a small smile. Meanwhile, Ewing is furious because he thought he would finally be able to defeat his opponent, and was obstructed by a wealthy girl. Finally, Ewing loses all his strength and falls, and Jin is genuinely worried, although Jaryong claims that he doesn't believe he is dead because he is too strong to lose his life over something like that. At the same time, he reassures her, saying not to worry because he won't seek revenge, as it would only tarnish his reputation and image, and that's not something someone like Ewing would want. Meanwhile, Jaryong takes pictures of the scene with his cell phone to have a record and tells Jin that she now owes him double the money because she saved his life twice. This infuriates the girl, who expected at least some gratitude from the boy after helping him in the fight. However, they both continue on their way. As they advance, Jin begins to smell a sweet scent that catches her attention, but they don't stop. On the contrary, they venture further into the abandoned shopping center, and the scent becomes stronger. When they finally reach the source of that exquisite aroma, they find an adventurer who has lost his life there, and in his bag, he has nothing less than real honey. Once they manage to open the bag, they notice that the scent goes beyond anything they had experienced before. A sweet and endearing aroma, so potent that it makes one forget what they were thinking. Now our protagonist and Jin understand why all the monsters were so attracted to that honey. This brings them back to their senses, and Jaryong asserts that they must leave quickly before more monsters reappear because things could get complicated. So, they both take the real honey and a white bag they didn't check but assume it must contain more honey. When they return to the first floor of the shopping center, Jin fearfully notices that Yuang is no longer where they left him. And as she finishes uttering those words, the villain shouts at them from a distance, claiming that he remembers Jaryong's face perfectly, and that he will soon get his revenge. After this promise, he runs away. But then a gigantic titan appears behind him, and in an instant, without even giving him a chance to defend himself, the monster devours Yuang. Jin and Jaryong, who witness the whole scene, are astonished and decide to quickly leave through the back door to prevent such things from happening again. After a while of walking on their way home, with their missions fulfilled, Jaryong asserts that each of them should go their separate ways to finish what they started. After shaking hands as comrades, our protagonist reminds Jin not to forget to pay, and to remember that everything that happened must remain a secret. When Jaryong turns around to leave, he jokingly tells Jin to take care because otherwise they will meet again. And to the surprise of the boy, Jin asks if they can see each other again sometime. Later, Jaryong arrives at his boss's hideout with the loot from his job and delivers the real honey. Then he asks if he can keep the 2 bags that were next to the honey, and his boss assures him that he can. As a general rule, all the other items, except for the object in question, are for the smuggler to take. At one point, the boss notices Jaryong's concern and asks if it's because of the adventurer who lost his life at his hands. But he assures him that he died for another reason, so he has no regrets, but it's something else. Then, to change the subject a bit, he asks who will consume that honey capable of reviving the dead. But then his boss reveals to him that the object has another power, the ability to increase an individual's talent limit. But it only works on people who haven't reached adulthood yet. For this reason, the boss believes it could be for someone from Warrior High School. We then see in our protagonist's memories what really happened when Jin asked to see him again. It wasn't for romantic reasons, but because there is an entrance exam in winter, and although they only accept a handful of people, the girl believes that Jaryong has a good chance of getting in and joining Warrior High School. No adventurer can explore a dungeon alone, no matter how high their level is, as new obstacles and problems always arise that they must overcome inside. That's why a team is needed. Different adventurers with different talents use their strengths to compensate for each other's weaknesses and overcome them. That's how dungeons are explored. Warrior High School, Jin explains, also has political factions in each grade. In her grade, Grade 2, 2 of the top 3 students lead the factions, meaning they form teams within the faction. And, as Jaryong understands, Jin is not part of any faction. Jin tries to defend herself against possible attacks from Jaryong and says she knows she doesn't have very good skills and maybe that's why no one wants her on their team. But it's not entirely true because even those who are not part of factions have their own teams. The reality is that the leader of one of the factions doesn't even like Jin's presence, so she is intentionally isolating her from anyone else. That's why the girl is currently surviving as a lone fighter, but she can't continue to survive that way in future grades. That's why she wants to hire Jaryong because with his extremely high skill, they could survive without needing anyone else. Although our protagonist heard all those words, he said goodbye without saying anything else, wishing her good luck, thinking to himself that Jin is a funny person. This attitude makes it clear to the girl that he won't contact her again. However, his thoughts on that matter quickly dissipate when she sees Professor Kang Yoongguk in front of her, the close combat instructor, who tells her that it's not too late to finish the mission. Seeing her professor there, Jin gets nervous and asks what will happen if she hasn't finished within the time limit. Kang then tells her that unfortunately, many of her classmates requested a rescue from the place as they encountered high-level monsters that shouldn't be there. That's why they couldn't reach the coins, even in the place where she obtained her last coin. a big monster was reported, so she approached the area to check if everything was in order. Nervous because she believes they are about to discover her, Jin claims that everything is in order, and seconds later, Kang asks her to stand behind him. As she turns around to see what's happening, Jin comes face to face with an adult ape titan, much larger than the small one she had encountered before, which wasn't really small, but much smaller in comparison to this one behind her. And this ape titan has a danger level of 7. Seeing such a beast, even Kang was surprised that it was there, and after moving Jin a little further from the fighting zone, he started to fight the titan, demonstrating incredible skills as he didn't receive a single blow from his opponent but managed to deliver severe punches to its face. This is because most of the teachers are adventurers who had to stop entering dungeons due to serious injuries but were very powerful. Some, like Kang, even received the ranker title. After defeating the monster and confirming that Jin was fine, Kang decided it was time to return to the high school. When these two were about to reach the base, they encountered two boys talking to each other and coming to the conclusion that those who requested a rescue should retake the test. Kang approaches them and tells Jin that once she verifies that everyone is present, she should confirm the numbers and put on the uniform. But in the few seconds that Jin was alone, Anisha, the faction leader who despises her, appears, sarcastically congratulating her for safely arriving at the high school. Later, we will discover that Anisha is none other than Jin's cousin. 6 years ago, Jin Seram, Jin's uncle, teaches a young 11-year-old Jin fire powers, but he seems somewhat disappointed to see how much she struggles despite her great effort. He stops her at that moment, assuring her that it's enough for the day, and that she has improved compared to the previous time. Sweating from the intense effort, Jin stops the training there and uses her time to watch her cousin Anisha, who is training beside her. Compared to Jin, Anisha demonstrates incredible skills, much better than those of pure-blooded elves, so it's hardly noticeable that she is a mixed blood like her cousin. Seeing this, Zeke assures Jin that if she wants to continue her path as an adventurer, she will be compared to her cousin for the rest of her life, and will end up being just her shadow. Although being compared is the least of her concerns, as Anisha has shown a somewhat destructive attitude from a young age. In the present day, Anisha shows up with her group at Warrior High, right behind Jin, and begins to mock her, believing that she had to request a rescue. In a passive-aggressive manner, she also expresses pity for Jin for not having a team. Jin takes the opportunity to sarcastically suggest that they team up, but Anisha claims that it's not possible for two people with the same role to be on a team, especially when both are long-range damage dealers. Anisha assures Jin that she will find a team and can retake the test, but she is slightly surprised to learn that Jin, like a few other students, has already taken and passed the test. Before leaving, Anisha reminds Jin not to try too hard because, in any case, she will inherit the family company. This provokes a great fury in Jin, although she doesn't show it outwardly. Meanwhile, Jaryong rushes to the hospital upon receiving a call about his father's condition. Worried, he arrives at his father's room, where the doctors inform him that his father hasn't had a relapse, but has an extremely rare condition. There are no other recorded cases of a human being infected with dragon blood and surviving. Anticipating the specialist's words, Jaryong affirms that he already knows there is no cure for that condition, but with the current technology, it's possible to suppress the patient's pain with medication. The problem is that one of the ingredients for the medication is the milk of an extremely dangerous monster, the Sky Tiger, a level 5 threat. And it's the only medication that can be used at the current stage of his father's condition. However, there is a shortage of that ingredient in the medication production because adventurers are using it for something else. They create injectables that can increase their strength and endurance for a long period of time, even with a small dose, and all the milk from the Sky Tiger is being used for the production of those injectables. When Jaryong hears this new information, he becomes furious and can't believe that the companies are not taking responsibility for producing the medication for a dying person. However, the doctor explains that they use 10 times more ingredients for such a medication compared to an injectable. Everyone wants the injectables, while the only person on the entire planet who needs that medication is Jaryong's father. So the multi-billion-dollar companies are not willing to lose profits just to save one person's life. Despite this, the doctor assures Jaryong that he will do everything possible, but without the ingredients, they are in a difficult situation. Later, realizing the dire situation he's in, Jaryong realizes he has no other option and calls Jin, who is at the gymnasium at that moment. He tells her that he is in trouble and that she must accept the deal, but instead of asking for money, he negotiates for her to obtain the necessary amount of Sky Tiger milk. Excited, Jin accepts and tells him that her company's development team is currently producing that item, so she could probably get it without any problems, especially since the required quantity is not large. With that, they close the deal. But before ending the call, Jin tells Jaryong that they should train on Sunday so that he can take the entrance exam properly. When the day comes, both boys meet at the Jin Seram group building in the special defense industry to assess Jaryong's potential. Once inside, Jin explains some specific issues to her companion. Excluding magic, he must be ranked as a C in all 5 categories, which are the minimum requirements to become an adventurer. For example, Jin has a C in strength, B in agility, C in endurance, B in intelligence, A in tolerance, and D in magic. He must also be ranked as a B in at least 3 of those categories to be considered a high-level warrior. After this, they give Jaryong a special suit and leave him on a battlefield facing a robot that is 3 times his size, the Gear Krone Pro 9.22. Without much enthusiasm, Jaryong decides to make the effort and, in the process, he hopes to discover his true potential, something that has piqued his curiosity for some time since he has never taken any exams before. While Jaryong faces the golem robot, Jin and a golem expert named Young watch him through giant screens. Young is impressed by the boy's bravery, stating that most people get nervous and fearful when standing in front of a golem. Usually, the talent test is conducted in the 6th or 7th year. The examinee uses special equipment for detailed measurements and pushes their body to the limit in various fields. Many times, because of this, it's impossible to measure whether they have incredible talent or if they have trained for a long time. But Jaryong's physique is almost professional, so it won't be easy to push him to his limit. Or so Jin thinks as she watches him with concern. Not because she worries about his well-being, as she knows he'll be fine, but because she needs him to demonstrate great potential without discovering her own abilities. The situation worsens as Jin's lie starts to show cracks, and Young becomes curious. Jin had mentioned that she couldn't enter high school because she failed the entrance exam. But seeing the boy's great talent, Young can't believe that and starts asking innocently where Jin failed if he has such talent. Quickly, Jaryong managed to read the golem robot's pattern, dodging it a couple of times and finding an opening to counter it. He demonstrates being better than the average professional just with his senses. Hearing this, Jin asks if the measurement has been completed, but Young affirms that it's more complicated than that because Jaryong hasn't reached his limit yet. To push him to his limit, it's not enough to increase the battle difficulty by 1 or 2 levels since Jaryong's level is much higher. The only way to push him to his limits is to raise the golem to 100% difficulty, but Young is unsure about doing that. She looks at Jin, stating that it's illegal to remove the safety mode from someone who is not yet a professional, waiting for a response from her. However, Jin pretends not to know what she's talking about and wonders how they could push him to his limit. As Young starts thinking of possibilities, since it's also her first time facing such a situation, she hears a scolding from the director, Jin's uncle Zeke, coming from behind. He enters the room, stating that he hasn't allowed the use of the research lab without a report, and now she is destined for imprisonment. Hearing such strong words, Jin defends Young, stating that it was she who requested the use of the room, hoping that would be reason enough. But contrary to what she believed, she only receives a harsh response from Zeke, who tells her that she has no power there and that, in any case, it's her father's place, not hers, so there's nothing she can take responsibility for there. Seeing Zeke's reaction, Young only manages to confirm the rumors about him, that he has always been very cold and harsh with Jin since she was little, even though she didn't do anything wrong. When Zeke is about to continue scolding his niece, he is interrupted by Jaryong speaking through the transmitter, asking if everything is okay or why they haven't sent another enemy. Zeke then asks who that boy is, and Young jumps in to explain that he is a friend of Jin's who failed his exams last year and is now trying to train for this year's admission. Upon realizing that Jin was only helping a friend, Zeke changes his attitude and decides to intervene. But his intervention is not just letting him test his potential with another golem. Upon learning that a safe level golem is not enough, he decides that he, the director himself, will descend to the battlefield and fight against him. It's not so unusual since sometimes, when it's difficult to test someone's limit, instead of sending golems, adventurers face each other, although this time, the opponent is far superior to the trainee. When Zeke descends to the battlefield, he doesn't even bother introducing himself, and Jaryong doesn't understand who he is or who he is facing. but his senses tingle faster than his mind, and he begins to worry as he senses the powerful aura emanating from his opponent. At that moment, for the first time, even after fighting the villain at the mall, he feels that it would be impossible to defeat him. And that's because Zeke, in addition to being the director of the research center in the Jin Seram group, is also ranked 7th in Korea, a class-wide adventurer. Jaryong's strategy was simple, a single strike with all his strength behind it, targeting Zeke, and once the opponent dodges it, he attacks using the opening created. However, his plan is not working against his opponent because, despite attacking relentlessly, he never finds an opening to land the decisive blow. On the contrary, when Jaryong manages to strike Zeke, the latter effortlessly grabs his staff and, keeping hold of the weapon, kicks our protagonist forcefully, sending him flying to the other side of the battlefield. Then, without a single drop of sweat, Zeke asks Jaryong if he's making that move only because he knows it's not a real battle or if he genuinely thinks it would work on him because, if that's the case, he's an idiot. Moreover, he's so useless that he dropped his weapon even without losing consciousness. While Zeke insults him in this manner, Jaryong continues clutching his stomach in pain from his opponent's blow. Zeke then throws his staff towards Jaryong from a distance and tells him that he has been too patient, allowing him to make 2 idiotic mistakes, so he has been lenient enough and will now fight seriously. If he makes any more stupid moves, Zeke will send him back, preventing him from becoming an adventurer. Unfazed by the ranker's threats, Jaryong mockingly says that he doesn't know why, but he believes Zeke has some ill feelings towards him. With that said, he begins to fight again, and Zeke casually thinks that he's repeating the same pattern as always. However, he is surprised when Jaryong, instead, launches a long-range attack to catch him off guard, although Zeke effortlessly dodges it and claims it's a standard move. But that's not all Jaryong had planned. He proceeds to deliver various constant long-range attacks coming from all directions, attacks that Zeke defends with his own hands. Behind the screen, Young is astonished as she believes she's witnessing a battle between 2 professionals. But then Young makes a comment that leaves Jin thinking. She asserts that Jaryong has a detrimental weakness, which means Jin is much better in that department. This comment greatly confuses the girl, who can't believe what she's hearing because if Jaryong is fighting on equal terms with her uncle and hasn't lost yet, it doesn't make sense for her to have something he lacks. However, her thoughts are interrupted as the battle takes another turn. After solely evading his opponent's attacks, Zeke eventually grabs Jaryong's arm, stopping any possible attacks, and then delivers a powerful blow to his stomach, much stronger than the previous one, sending him crashing forcefully into the battlefield wall. Though Jaryong tries to get up from that powerful blow, Zeke claims he lost and that the defeat was inevitable because he lacks something essential, which is the same weakness Young had noticed. He lacks basic training. Hearing this, Jin asks what they mean, and Young explains that talent and the sense of battle are one thing, but they're fundamentals. Their basic understanding and posture of attacking and defending. It's as if he has never had a real fight in his life. With that kind of talent and a bit of basic training, he could go far, but he fell short along the way, which disappoints Young a little. Upon hearing these words, Jin remembers that when they first met, Jaryong claimed that he was never taught how to fight and that everything he knows he learned on his own through observation. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Zeke turns around and says he'll give him his marks, but he suggests that Jaryong surrender because someone as weak as him could die relying on that kind of talent, and it's a shame he doesn't make an effort. But then, behind him, Jaryong rises again despite his injuries and expresses that he doesn't understand why Zeke hates lazy people so much. But despite that, and regardless of the marks, Jaryong wants another round to show him what he's capable of. These words surprise the director, who was confident that with that last blow, it would be impossible for Jaryong to get up for a long time. Jin and Young, surprised by what they are seeing and concerned for the boy's well-being, tell him that he doesn't need to continue fighting as they already have the necessary data to analyze his power. At the same time, Zeke asserts that what he is doing doesn't make sense because the outcome wouldn't change no matter how many times they fight. After some silly taunts from the director, Jaryong states that his only reason to keep fighting is because he's angry, and what will calm him down is landing a few punches. The reality is that one of the reasons he agreed to undergo the training wasn't just for the tiger milk. Since he was young, he never received proper training. No one taught him how to fight. Instead, he learned everything through observation and self-practice. With his incredible natural talent, he managed to compensate for the lack of basics and formal training. Moreover, thanks to his field experience, Jaryong could do whatever he wanted. Impressive progress. However, despite this, Jaryong never thought he was better than others. He only felt disappointed by the fakes that presented themselves as high-ranking but were actually quite weak in comparison. However, Zeke was different. Even purely based on talent, Jaryong could be a monster beyond Zeke's capabilities. Upon encountering someone he considers the real deal, his blood started boiling unknowingly, as if all his father's strength accompanied him at that moment. Zeke, with his arrogant attitude and somewhat angered by the boy's persistence, prepares to fight and unleashes a great surge of power, although clearly it's not even close to his full potential. From the observation room, the two girls are expectant and surprised as they realize that Jaryong, at that moment, is not the same person as a few minutes ago. Even his posture is different. The same applies to Zeke, who has taken a more serious stance in the battle. Quickly, Jaryong unleashes a barrage of attacks, and although Zeke easily dodges most of them, one manages to graze his cheek and draw a few drops of blood. Jin believes that compared to the first part of the battle, Jaryong is being rough and straightforward. But Young, astonished, states that there isn't a single opening in his movements that would allow the opponent to strike, which is amazing, and she wonders who taught him to move like that. On the other hand, Zeke not only evades his opponent's attacks but also tries to land his own, yet he never manages to connect, as Jaryong constantly evades and defends with the staff. Zeke realizes there is an opening once Jaryong lands, but at that moment, it would be impossible for him to dodge a new attack from his opponent. Therefore, he decides to end the battle and strikes him head-on with a powerful punch, generating a cloud of smoke around him due to its force. The director is confident that he has won the battle and claims that if Jaryong didn't misuse the staff's ability, he could have won if he had continued the attacks. Then Zeke asks if that was his last pride, defeated and battered. But smiling, Jaryong affirms that no, he only memorized up until that moment because during the second part of the battle, all he did was follow each of the movements he memorized from watching his father practice. In his memories, his father found him imitating his movements and approached him, telling him to stop practicing and play together. That's why after that last move, there was no more battle knowledge in his head. After Jaryong uttered those last words, he faints from the pain, and Zeke, somewhat surprised by the boy's confession, uses his great powers to heal him of all the wounds he had inflicted. The director is infamous among the higher ranks for his sharp and frivolous attitude, but no one complains about him because thanks to his great white adventurer power, he is Korea's great healer. Jin rushes into the battlefield, concerned, and Zeke assures her that he has already healed her friend after she asks for the boy's name. When Jin confirms that his name is Yoo Jaryong, Zeke is left thinking in a heartwarming way that he didn't know he would meet his son there, referring to his realization of who our protagonist's father is. After the fight, Zeke is impatiently waiting for a man he has summoned to the location and is in a bad mood because the other person hasn't arrived yet. However, after some time, the man appears before him in a red car with a haughty yet friendly attitude, apologizing for the delay. To initiate the conversation, he mentions that he has heard rumors that Zeke has fought with a boy, assuming that the boy is more than just an ordinary child. However, before finishing the sentence, he starts shouting in surprise upon realizing that Zeke, an adventurer of such high level as himself, has a cut on his cheek, something unprecedented and certainly not something he would expect from a battle against a kid. After a while, when they have calmed down, Zeke gets into his friend's car and they both discuss this boy. Jin's uncle tells him that the boy he fought against is training to take the entrance exam in winter, and Zeke, recalling it, remembers that no one has passed that exam in the last 3 years. Although he is certain that this boy has a chance, he acknowledges that if a mere 17-year-old, without identification or identity, managed to cut his cheek, Jin Seram himself, then he must have talent and might be capable of being admitted. Zeke asserts that comparing people to elves never makes sense, but he assures that there should be no difference between Jaryong and his friend. Later, we will learn that his friend is Kang Jin-ho, a black-class adventurer ranked 19 in South Korea, who arrogantly claims that there must clearly be a difference between him and a 17-year-old kid, no matter how powerful the kid may be. Clearly, due to his age and talent, Kang should have the advantage over a child who lacks battle experience, even though Kang himself is only 12 years old and not much older than our protagonist. Meanwhile, Jaryong wakes up in a strange room on a stretcher and quickly realizes that his wounds have healed, and he no longer feels any pain. But he doesn't understand how that happened. At that moment, Jin enters the room with a cup of tea for her companion and, half laughing, asks him if he really thought he could defeat her uncle, because that is impossible, to which Jaryong affirms that he started it. But then he realizes that Zeke is Jin's uncle and is surprised, so she explains that he is her uncle on her mother's side. Jaryong then comments that it makes sense considering the way he treats her. This surprises the girl, who clearly has a complicated history with her uncle and his ways of treating her. But Jaryong continues, saying that Zeke must have been worried seeing her with him because he was afraid some guy might take advantage of his niece. Before they could continue their conversation, Young enters the room to ask our protagonist if he is okay and then asserts that Zeke probably healed not only his battle wounds but any previous injuries as well, since he is the best healer in Korea. Hearing this, Jaryong is surprised because he realizes that despite Zeke's incredible power, healing is not even his main task. Setting that aside, Young hands Jaryong a sheet with the recovered exam results, and together with our protagonist, we find out that Jaryong scored a B in strength, A in endurance, O in agility, C in intelligence, D in magic, and B in tolerance, with D being the lowest grade. While Jin celebrates his results incredibly, Jaryong wonders if those are good results or not, which makes Young doubt if the boy is ready to attend high school. To become a first-class adventurer, one needs to have at least a B rank in skill statistics. E is weak, D is average, C is excellent, and B is superhuman. However, a balance of stars is also required, as high agility won't matter if there isn't enough endurance. This surprises Jin because Jaryong has a B in strength and an A in the other main abilities, which means he is not only balanced but also his raw statistics are insane. Young adds some comments, affirming that Zeke, despite his power, doesn't have only a rank statistics because the statistics represent innate talent and not current ability. So even with the best statistics, there won't be much difference between an A and a D if there is no training. But that's not the only concern, because there are also things that cannot be measured, such as whether the used ability fits the adventurer, or the sense of battle or experience. He then adds that many adventurers have bridged that gap with pure determination, looking at Jin and giving her a knowing wink, which makes the girl blush as she is not accustomed to being praised for her battle level. Later, Jaryong is about to leave, and Young advises them to visit the equipment production department. But when Jin tries to explain that there is no way Zeke would approve of that, Young smilingly confirms that Zeke already approved it beforehand, so they are free to move in that area. Not only that, but before leaving, the director asked them to treat Jaryong as his guest and to manufacture a weapon that suits him regardless of the cost. All this new information leaves Jin stunned, as she can't believe her uncle has behaved so kindly, especially towards an unknown boy. High-quality weapons and armor are the dream of every adventurer, regardless of their talent level. When the quality of a weapon is unsatisfactory, it won't be able to withstand its owner's power. Therefore, as an adventurer's skill increases, they will require higher quality equipment to fully utilize their abilities. Although Jaryong understands Jin's explanation, he can't grasp the importance of it at that moment. Besides, he believes that in high school, they will provide him with usable equipment of the same quality. This statement astonishes the two girls, who can't believe that someone as powerful as him can be so ignorant about how the world works. Jin explains that if they were talking about a normal adventurer institution, it would be as Jaryong describes. However, they are joining the unique Warrior High. In order to provide students with a level playing field, each school implements different regulations regarding the equipment that can be used. In the case of Warrior High, considering the different talents and abilities, they view obtaining good equipment as part of a skill. Thus, they leave it up to each student to acquire their own equipment. This leaves Jaryong thinking, as he believed that everything was measured solely by money. Yoon affirms that he is not entirely wrong, but it is also true that if someone enters Warrior High, it's because they are considered a great talent and have the potential to become a powerful warrior. That's why, regardless of having money or not, there will always be people willing to invest in them. Many millionaires start taking an interest in skilled warriors, offering modeling opportunities or a percentage of the earnings once the adventurer graduates. However, to enter the high school, one must first pass the exam, and transfer exams are usually more challenging than regular entrance exams. So, Jaryong needs to prepare more than usual and acquire new equipment. Knowing this, Zeke decided to help Jaryong in his exam preparation, offering him these benefits, including custom-made equipment. Later, as our protagonists head to the refinery to discuss the equipment, Jin mentions that within the high school, it doesn't matter how much money one has, but rather who is asked to create the equipment. And the production department of the Jin Seram group is considered one of the best in the world. Although Jaryong believes he understands everything now, he thinks they are making a big fuss over equipment, assuming there shouldn't be much difference between one piece and another. That's why he is surprised when they arrive at the refinery, a place covered in lava and molten iron, also known as the Fiery Abyss Dungeon. However, his biggest concern is not that he misunderstood the importance of equipment, but rather that before them stands a gigantic Cyclops monster that seems incredibly difficult to defeat. However, the monster is merely complaining about Zeke waking it up from its weekend nap without even having the guts to come down himself, and instead bringing two clueless kids. Quickly noticing Jaryong's combative attitude, Jin steps in to explain that the monster is the team leader of the production department. Thus, they find out that they are in front of Argeus, the greater titan of its species. After the introductions, Argeus asks for whom the weapon is intended, and upon seeing that it's for Jaryong, he decides to test the boy himself, as numbers and tests mean nothing to him. He challenges Jaryong to try to hunt him, the greater titan, with his current weapon, the staff. This surprises the boys, who have no idea what is happening. Argeus states that unless they prove their worth through blood, sweat, and tears, he won't make a weapon for Jaryong. However, Jaryong appears different from all the other young ones for whom he has made weapons. Eyes accustomed to hunting, a suppressed yet refined sense of warrior hostility. And he is not mistaken because without hesitation, Jaryong launches himself into battle against the Titan. He executes a powerful move and strikes it with his staff, although it seems to have no effect. However, in a serious and intimidating manner, the Titan asks Jaryong where he obtained such a weapon. Seeing that attitude, Jaryong is dumbfounded. And that's how the first part of this manhwa ends. If you've reached this part of the video, let me tell you that you're one of the few people who made it here. So, comment the word warrior in the comments. Remember to subscribe to not miss any videos. With that said, see you in the next video.